Chapter 1. A Rat and a Mole. Mole came out of his hole near the river bank. Water Rat walked over to him. "Hello, Mole," Rat said. "I have not seen you here before." "I don't go out very often," Mole said, "and I haven't been here before. I'm happier at home underground." "It's always better to be at home," Rat said, "but I also like to swim around in the river." "Is this a river?" Mole asked. "All this water?" "It certainly is," Rat said, "and it's wonderful. I love it." "But what do you do in it?" Mole wanted to know. "Swim about in it, of course. Look at things. Talk to the ducks and other animals that live in the river. Oh, there's always a lot to do in a river. Would you like to meet some of my friends?" "Oh, yes, I'd really like that," Mole said. "Good. Let's go to my boat and get my picnic basket. We'll have a nice picnic by the river." Rat and Mole jumped on the boat. Rat got his picnic basket. They traveled and returned to land. On land, Mole felt the ground beneath him move. "Oh, what's happening?" he cried. "Don't worry about it," a voice said. And Badger came out of the ground. He was quite old and often had a bad temper. "And please try not to sit on my front door." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Badger," Mole said. At this moment, Rat returned with the picnic basket. Badger went to the river bank to help Rat with it. "My dear friend Ratty," he said, "it's so good to see you." "And to see you," Rat said. "I see you have met my new friend Mole. Would you like to join us for lunch?" "That's most kind of you," Badger said. "Are you expecting anyone else to join you?" "Only Toad," Rat said. "Oh dear," Badger said, and shook his head sadly. "I'm afraid Toad is a problem." Mole said, "I've heard of Mr. Toad. He's famous. I look forward to meeting him." "I knew Toad's father," Badger said. "He was a fine animal. But as for Toad, he's a show-off." "What's a show-off?" Mole asked. "A show-off, my dear Mole," Badger explained, "is an animal who tries hard to impress others. He wants them to say, 'Oh, what a clever Toad,' and things like that. He's always up to something. If it's not one thing, it's another." "I don't understand," Mole said. "You will," Badger said. "In time you will. Oh, yes." Chapter 2. An Invitation from Toad. At this moment, Toad arrived. He ran forward and did a little dance. "Hello, hello, hello," he said. "It's my dear friend Rat and Badger. How are you, old friend?" "I'm quite well, thank you," Badger said in a not very friendly voice. "And how are you, Ratty?" Toad demanded. "Oh, I'm fine. This is my friend Mole," Rat said. "How do you do?" Toad said to Mole, who smiled shyly. "We were just talking about you," Badger said. "Ah, I'm not surprised. I'm so famous, you know. Everyone is talking about me all the time." "We are going to have a picnic," Rat said. "Would you like to join us?" "No, no, no. You must all come home with me and have lunch at Toad Hall. My lunches are famous." "I have to go now," Badger said. "I have things to do." He walked slowly away, shaking his head. "Famous lunches," he said under his breath. "What a bunch of nonsense." "Isn't Mr. Badger feeling well?" Rat said. "Oh, he's like that sometimes. Pass the sandwiches, will you?" Toad said, forgetting that he'd invited Mole and Rat to have lunch at Toad Hall. The friends ate their picnic. Then Toad said, "Why don't you both come and stay with me at Toad Hall? There are a lot of rooms. We could have a lot of fun." "We'll visit you one afternoon," Rat said. No, come today," Toad said. "You'd like to do that, wouldn't you, Mole?" "Oh, yes," Mole said. "Thank you very much." "Mole is staying with me, Toad," Rat said. "I'm going to teach him all about the river, aren't I, Mole?" "What? Oh, yes. Yes, of course," Mole said. "But I'd like to see Toad Hall." "And so you shall," Toad said, taking the last sandwich. Then he asked Rat, "Have you seen any wild wooders recently?" "Who are the wild wooders?" Mole asked. "Animals who live in the wild wood," Toad said. "The rabbits are all right, but as for the others, you don't want to have anything to do with them." Rat said, "The weasels are the worst. You can't trust them. I never go into the wild wood." "And I never, ever invite them to Toad Hall," Toad said, finishing the last sandwich. He looked at the empty picnic basket. "Is there anything else to eat?" he asked. "No, Toad," Rat said. "You've eaten everything." "Then I'll be off to Toad Hall in one of my famous lunches." As Toad said this, Alfred the horse arrived, pulling a brightly painted caravan. "Ah, here's my beautiful caravan," Toad said. "Forget boats in the river, Mole. Travel the world in a caravan. Come inside. I have everything anyone could need." "It is rather beautiful," Mole said. "Come on my travels with me," Toad said. "We'll have such fun." "What do you think, Rat?" Mole asked. Rat thought for a moment. Then he said, "We'd better go with him. We can't trust him since he is foolish sometimes." "Nonsense," said Toad. "I'm a famous traveler. Jump on and we'll be off." Toad, Rat, and Mole jumped into a seat at the front of the caravan. "Off you go, Alfred," Toad called to the horse. Alfred shook his head sadly, just like Badger. "There'll be problems," he said. "Whatever Toad does, there are always problems." But he put his head down and began to pull. Slowly, the caravan moved away from the riverbank. Chapter 3. The Journey Begins. "This is the way to travel," Toad said, moving slowly through the countryside, enjoying the scenery. In the wild wood, however, the weasels were saying bad things about Toad. They hated him. Hiding behind trees and bushes, they watched the caravan move along the road. Suddenly there was a roaring sound, and a car raced toward the caravan. "Toot, toot!" The driver sounded the car's horn. "Toot, toot!" Alfred had to quickly pull the caravan to the side of the road. Toad fell off the seat and into a bush. Mole and Rat almost fell off the seat too, but they were able to hold on. The wild wooders laughed. "Road hog!" Alfred shouted at the driver of the car. "Road hog!" "Oh dear," Rat said. "I do hope Toad isn't hurt." He jumped off the caravan and ran to the bush. He bent over Toad. "Are you all right, Toad?" Rat asked. Toad opened his eyes. "Toot, toot," he said. "Toot, toot." "What do you mean?" Rat asked. "Toot, toot. It's the sound that car made." "I know," Rat said, "and it almost killed us. Toot, toot." Toad said again. "I think Toad has hurt his head," Rat said to Mole. "He's not well. He's making a noise like a car." Then he said to Toad, "We'll go to the police station and complain about the driver of that car." Toad sat up. "Complain? Complain? We will not complain. That wonderful, beautiful car is the way to travel. Fast. Toot, toot! I'm finished with horses and caravans. I'm going to get a car like that. After Mole and Rat listened to Toad, they took him back to his home. Later, Mole told Rat that he wanted to visit the badger. He's too shy, said Rat. That's why he lives alone in the wild wood. Days passed, and winter came. Mole left his home to look for the badger's house alone. Oh dear, he thought. I've taken a wrong turn. Shall I go back, or shall I go through the wild wood? He was afraid of the wild wood, but he was also tired, and it was a long way back. He wished Rat was with him. Rat was at home. He wanted to see Mole, so he went outside to look for him. Mole, he called. After a few moments, he soon found Mole. What are we going to do? Mole asked. I don't want to go into the wild wood, but I am so tired. I can't walk all the way back to the river. It's quicker through the wild wood, Rat said. Be brave. The two friends went into the wild wood. They could hear the wild wooders laughing. Rat and Mole walked and walked all that day, and the next, and the day after that. They were completely lost, and the weather was getting colder and colder. They were beginning to think that they would never get out of the wild wood when Mole felt something under his foot. He looked down. It was the bell at the entrance to Badger's underground home. Oh, how foolish we've been, he said. All this time we've been walking in a circle. We'll be safe now, Rat said. The wild wooders are afraid of Badger. He'll help us. And Rat rang the bell. Chapter 4. Toad drives a car. Badger was asleep when Rat rang his front doorbell. He was not pleased to be woken up. Who is it? He called. It's me, Rat, and my friend Mole, Rat called back. Please let us in. We lost our way, and we're tired and cold. They were very cold, because it had just started to snow. Badger was immediately more friendly. Come in, my friends, come in, he called. I thought you might be the weasels trying to sell me something. Rat and Mole opened Badger's front door and went into his underground house. Come and warm yourselves by the fire, Badger said, and join me for supper. It's nearly ready. We've been walking in the wild wood for several days, Rat said. We've been sleeping in the open and have had almost nothing to eat. Then you shall have a good meal with me, Badger said. They sat at his table and began to eat. I've heard bad news about Toad, Badger said. He bought a car. He drives around the countryside like a madman. He's already had several accidents. If he's not careful, he'll kill himself, or someone else. What can we do? Rat said. He never listens to anything I say. At that moment, Badger's front doorbell rang. Badger stood up. I'd better go and see who it is. A few minutes later, he came back into the room. He had Toad with him. I had a small accident, Toad said. I was sure I was somewhere near Badger's home, and here I am. He sat down in Badger's best chair. May I stay the night? Tell me about this accident, Badger said. Oh, I ran into some weasels. They were standing in the road. A foolish place to stand, Toad said. The car is quite useless now. How many useless cars are there now? Badger asked. Oh, I don't know, Toad said. I don't keep count. 6, perhaps. No, 7. Why do you have all these accidents, Toad? Badger demanded. The cars are no good, of course, Toad said. They don't stop in time. They go in the wrong direction. I suppose it is not your driving that causes the accidents? Badger said. My driving? There's nothing wrong with my driving, Toad exclaimed. Badger looked at Rat and Mole. It's time we did something, he said. It's no good talking to him, Rat said. He'll promise anything, and then as soon as he leaves here, he'll break his promise. Is that true, Toad? Badger asked. Well, yes. What I say here is true for when I am here, but it doesn't have to be true when I'm not here, does it? So if you promise now not to drive a car again, as soon as you leave here, you'll get another car. That's right, Toad said. Toot toot. I'll get a better, faster one next time. Badger looked at Mole and Rat. My friends, he said, Toad must stay here until we cure him. Will you stay with me and make sure he doesn't get away? Oh, yes. Please, Badger, Mole said. I really love your house. It's so much better than mine. And I'll stay too, Rat said. And so Toad had to stay with Badger until he promised not to drive a car again and kept his promise. Chapter 5. Toad Tricks Rat. Toad stayed with Badger, but he was not happy. He wanted to drive a motor car. He wanted to do this so much that he put chairs together and pretended they were a motor car. He sat in the chairs and made the toot-toot sound. Then he pretended to have an accident and fell off the chairs onto the floor. Toad looked very foolish and rather sad. When Mole came into the room, Badger said, Don't worry about Toad lying on the floor. He's only pretending to be hurt. That's his third accident this morning. But Mole felt sorry for Toad. He went to him and helped him to his feet. Are you all right? He asked. I'm a little weak, Toad said. Don't listen to him, Badger said. We can't trust him. If we turn our backs, he'll run off and do something even more foolish. Just then, Rat came in. Badger said, I'm pleased to see you here, Ratty. I've been in all day and want to go for a walk. Mole needs a walk too. Will you stay here and watch Toad? Yes, all right, Rat said. Badger and Mole went out, leaving Rat alone with Toad. What have you been doing, Ratty? Toad asked. Thinking about my beautiful river, Rat said, and writing a poem about it. Really? Toad said. How interesting. Will you read your poem to me? I'd love to see the river again, but as you know, I can't leave Badger's home. I'm also very weak. Rat was very pleased to read his poem to Toad. As he did so, Toad lay quietly. When he finished, he said, What do you think of it? I'm sorry, Rat, Toad said, but I couldn't hear most of it. I'm not well, you know. I've had too many accidents. I may die. I'm sure you won't, Rat said. I ought to see a doctor. Be a good friend, Ratty, and ask the doctor to come here. Oh, I'm sure you aren't as ill as you think, Rat said. And bring my lawyer as well, please, Toad said. I need to make my will. Rat thought, Poor Toad. He must be very ill if he wants to make a will. I'd better get the doctor for him. Very well, Toad, he said. I'll go and get the doctor and your lawyer. He left Badger's home. As soon as he closed the door behind him, Toad began to laugh. Oh, how foolish Rat is, Toad said to himself. And Badger will be really angry when he comes back and finds that I'm not here. Then Toad left Badger's home, shouting, Toot toot and Poop poop. Chapter 6. Toad Gets in Trouble. It was not long before Toad saw a motor car by the side of the road outside a house. There was no one in it, So he jumped in, started the engine, and drove off. "Toot toot!" he shouted. "Poop poop!" When the owner of the car came out of the house, he saw that his car was not there. He immediately called the police. "Someone has stolen my car," he said. "I think it was Toad." A policeman waited for Toad to come into town. As soon as he did, the policeman stopped him. "You have stolen that car," he said. "You are a thief and must come to court." Toad tried to drive away, but the policeman stood in front of the car. Toad called him Fat Face and drove over the policeman's foot. This made him angry. He shouted for help, and more policemen came. They took Toad to the police station. The next day, Toad stood in court before a judge. "This Toad," one of the policemen said to the judge, "has stolen a car. And what's worse, he drove it over my foot. And even more serious, he called me Fat Face." "That is very serious," the judge said. "It is bad enough to steal a car. It is even worse to drive it over a policeman's foot. But to call a policeman Fat Face is the worst possible thing to do. I feel quite sick. What do you have to say for yourself, Toad?" "I didn't mean to steal the car," Toad said. "I only wanted to borrow it. I wasn't thinking, you see. I had been ill." Rat stood up and said, "That's true, Judge. He has been ill. My friends, Mole, Rat, and Badger, had been looking after me. I went out for a walk and saw this beautiful car. No one was looking after it, so I thought, this car needs looking after. So I looked after it." "You drove over a policeman's foot," the judge said. "Oh, no," Toad said. "The policeman put his foot under the wheel of the car." "You called him Fat Face," the judge said. Toad had no answer to this. Then Badger stood up. "May I say a few words?" he said. "Certainly, Mr. Badger," the judge said. "I knew his father," Badger said. "I knew his uncle and his aunt. He is a sad, foolish animal. We should all feel sorry for him." Badger sat down. The judge said, "It's lunchtime, and I am hungry, so I don't want to listen to anything more. It is clear that you are guilty, Toad, and this court must punish you. You will go to prison for 20 years. Have you anything to say?" Toad was very unhappy. 20 years in prison was a very long time. He stood up as tall as he could and said, "No, Fat Face." He turned to everyone in the court. "You are all fat faces. I am Toad, the great and famous Toad. You cannot send me to prison." "Oh, yes, I can," the judge said. "And you will go to prison for 40 years for calling me Fat Face." Then the judge said to the policeman, "Take him away." And they led Toad away to prison. Chapter 7. Toad Goes to Prison. Poor Toad was very unhappy in prison. His room was small and very cold. The food was bad, and the bed was hard. Toad could not sleep, and he usually felt quite ill. The jailers were unkind to him. They did not think he was important. When he complained about the food, the cold, and his bed, they just laughed at him. "This isn't a hotel, Toad," one of them said. "It's a prison, and don't you forget it. And you'll be here for 40 years. Luckily, however, one of the jailer's daughters liked him. She also felt sorry for him. Her name was Phoebe. She worked in the prison and brought Toad his food every day. "I don't think you should be here, Toad," she said. "You didn't hurt anybody. The only thing you did wrong was to call the judge Fat Face." She didn't know that he had stolen a car. The judge had not sent him to prison for that. He had sent him to prison for calling him Fat Face. "And you are right," she said. "The judge does have a fat face. It's wrong to keep you in prison for that." "That's what I tell myself every day," Toad said. "I am the great and famous Toad. I live at Toad Hall. I have many friends." "Perhaps I can help you to escape," Phoebe said. "Really?" he said. Toad was suddenly excited. "How can you do that?" "My aunt comes here every day to do the washing in the prison. I think for a little money she will let me bring in some of her clothes. You can put them on and pretend to be her. The jailers will let you out." "Me?" exclaimed Toad. "Me, the great and famous Toad, dressed in a washwoman's clothes? Oh no, I'm much too important to do that." He was suddenly not excited. "Do you want to get out of prison or not?" Phoebe asked. Toad thought for a moment. Then he said, "Yes, of course I do. I'm sorry." "I'll talk to my aunt," Phoebe said. Phoebe kept her word. The next day, she arrived with her aunt, who brought a basket of clothes. They dressed Toad in the clothes. The aunt looked at him. "The jailers won't think he is me," she said. "Oh, why not?" Toad demanded. "You are too ugly. We must hide your face." They hid Toad's face under a large hat. "That's better," the aunt said. "And remember that you are a washwoman, not Toad." "I shall send you money," Toad told her. To Phoebe he said, "And you must come and visit me at Toad Hall." Then he left his room, walked down the corridor, and went past the prison gate. No one stopped him. Soon he was free. Chapter 8. Off Again. It was a long way from the prison to Toad Hall. Soon Toad was tired. The washwoman's clothes made him feel hot and thirsty. He stopped by the river for a drink, and then went back on the road. "I don't know how much farther I can walk," he thought. "It's not right for the rich and famous Toad to have to walk like this." As he was thinking this, he heard a sound. "Toot, toot!" "It's a car," he thought. "I'll stop it. Perhaps the driver will let me ride with him." Toad stood in the middle of the road and held up an arm. The car stopped. The driver shouted, "What's the problem?" Toad did not know what to say. The car he stopped was the same car that he had stolen before. "Oh, what shall I do?" he thought. "I wonder if the driver will send for the police." "What is it you want, washwoman?" the driver called. Toad thought, "I'm safe. He doesn't know who I am." "I'm a poor washwoman," he said. "I've been working hard all day, and now I'm very tired. May I ride with you?" "Of course you can," the driver said. "Get in beside me." Toad got into the car. "Toot, toot," he said, and the driver drove off. A few minutes later, Toad said, "I'd love to drive a car like this. May I drive it? Just a little way?" "Of course you can," the driver said, "but drive very slowly." He let Toad drive the car. But Toad did not drive slowly. He drove as fast as he could. He turned a corner too fast and drove into a bush. "Now I'm in real trouble," he thought. He jumped out of the car and ran as fast as he could. At last, he reached Toad Hall. Badger, Mole, and Rat were there. "We heard you escaped," Badger said. "We knew you would come here." "We must have a party," Toad said. "I will sing. I will dance. I will tell stories about my exciting life. We will invite all the animals to come to the party, and I will tell them all about myself." Badger, Mole, and Rat looked at one another. "Oh dear," they thought. "What can we do about Toad? He will never change." And they were right. Playlet. The Wind in the Willows. The play begins in the library at Toad Hall. There are chairs and lots of books, all about toads. Badger, Mole, Rat, and Toad are sitting in the chairs having afternoon tea and talking. I have decided to have a party. It will be the biggest, greatest, and finest party ever held. Everyone who is important will come to it. They will all want to come to Toad Hall and be the guests of Toad.
It sounds very exciting, Toad.
I've never been to a party.
I used to go to parties when I was younger. Oh, yes. We'd dance and have a great time. But I don't go to parties now. They are too noisy. There are too many young animals. There'll be young and old animals at my party. I don't think having a party is a good idea, Toad. Why not? Well, why do you want to have a party? To celebrate my escape from prison. I'd keep quiet about that if I were you, Toad.
Badger's right, Toady. You shouldn't draw attention to yourself. I'm sure the police are looking for you.
I shall send out secret invitations.
How will the animals know they are invitations if they are secret?
That's a good question, Mole. I can see that you are a clever animal. That must be because you have lived underground all your life.
That's not fair, Badger. I'm as intelligent as Mole, and I don't live underground.
Exactly. And I'm the most intelligent animal of all. I'm the great and famous Toad. And I never stay underground for long. It's dark, and no one can see me there. You're making a big mistake, Toad. Believe me, don't have a party. I'll have the biggest party ever. There'll be songs and dances. There'll be storytelling and magic tricks. Oh, everyone will have a wonderful time. Songs? Who will sing? Blackbird? He can sing if he likes, but I shall sing most of the songs. My favorite is the Song of the Toad. It goes like this. Crow, crow, crow.
Other toads might like that, but I don't think all the animals will.
And I shall dance the dance of the toad, like this. Toad dances and falls over. Badger shakes his head. Mole and Rat help Toad to his feet. It will all end in tears. And I shall tell a story.
Let me guess. The story of Toad.
That's very clever of you, Ratty. How did you guess?
I don't know. It just seemed right.
It was the only possible story for Toad to tell. It's the only story he's interested in. I'm going home now. Take my advice, Toad. Forget about having a party. He goes out. Now there's work to do. You must both stay here at Toad Hall and help me send out the invitations.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Oh, yes. I'm completely sure. It'll be a party no one will ever forget. It is the night of the party. Toad Hall is full of animals in their best skins. There are lots of rabbits dancing, and some weasels are stealing whatever they can find. Toad is singing. No one is listening. Rat, Mole, and Badger are standing at the side of the room watching.
The rabbits are very rude. They're not listening to Toad.
Perhaps they don't think he's singing.
You're right. It doesn't sound like singing.
No one listened to his story either.
And when he started to dance, he fell over again.
This is just the beginning of the trouble, I'm afraid. The doors open, and 10 policemen walk in.
Everybody stand still. Nobody move.
I knew this would happen.
Are they going to take Toad away?
Oh, yes. He called the judge a fat face. He pretended to be a washwoman in order to escape from prison. He drove a car into a tree. Oh, yes, they'll take him away for sure.
What can we do?
At the moment, nothing. But we'll go to the court and hear what the judge has to say. The police take Toad away. As they do, he shouts, "You can't do this to me! I'm the great and famous Toad!"
Perhaps you are. Then you can be the great and famous Toad in prison.
They are now in the courtroom. Toad is standing in front of the judge. Badger, Mole, and Rat are also in court. There are also rabbits and weasels. "Your name is Toad." "You know it is. Why do you ask me, Fatface?"
Oh dear, he'll be in even worse trouble now.
That foolish animal will never learn to keep his mouth shut. "For calling me Fatface again, you will go to prison for 20 years. For crashing a car a second time, you will go to prison for another 20 years. For escaping from prison, you will go to prison for another 40 years.
That's 80 years. Will he live that long?
I don't think so. Badger, you must do something.
I will do my best. May I speak?" "You may, Badger. I'm always interested to hear what you have to say." "I think we all agree that something must be done about Toad." Everyone in the court, except for Mole and Rat, cheers. "But I do not think prison is the place for him. The animal is ill. There is something very wrong with his brain." There are more cheers. "He needs hospital care, not prison. I will take him back to Toad Hall and lock him in. I will find a doctor and nurses to look after him. That is the best thing to do." "I think you are right, Badger. Very well. The foolish and rude Toad will be put in your care." The friends are standing outside the court. "Thank you, Badger. Now I can get another car and—" "Oh, no, Toad. I meant what I said. We shall take you back to Toad Hall. I shall lock you in. I shall send for a doctor who will give you medicine to make you just want to sit quietly in your library and read. Mole and Rat will visit you from time to time, but they will be the only friends you have." But... "No buts, Toad. We do not trust you, do we, Rat?"
I'm afraid not.
"Mole?"
Sadly, no.
"Then let us all go to Toad Hall.